The true origins of the Erdtree and the greater will are far more ancient and potentially sinister than most tarnished realize, predating even the Golden Order's rise. Beneath the golden boughs that stretch across the lands between, beneath the shimmering grace that guides the lost and the exiled, there lies a foundation built not on divine benevolence, but on something far older, something that existed before light itself took root in this fractured realm. The Erdtree, that luminous beacon visible from every corner of the world, may not be the beginning of all things, as the Golden Order would have you believe. It may instead be a monument erected atop ruins we were never meant to remember, a gilded cage constructed by forces whose true intentions remain obscured behind layers of myth, propaganda, and deliberate erasure. What if the very ground upon which Queen Marika built her eternal empire was already consecrated to powers that predate her godhood, powers that shaped the primordial soup of existence into forms both wondrous and grotesque? What if the shattering of the Elden Ring was not an act of rebellion or madness, but the inevitable conclusion of a plan set in motion before the first demigod drew breath? These are not idle questions whispered in the dark corners of Reddit threads or Discord servers. They are the foundations of a vast interconnected web of theories, observations, and interpretations that have emerged from the collective consciousness of millions of players who have wandered the lands between, died countless deaths, and pieced together fragments of lore from item descriptions, environmental storytelling, and cryptic dialogue. Since Elden Ring's release, a peculiar phenomenon has taken root as in the gaming community. As players lay in their beds, exhausted from the day's trials, they have turned not to white noise or ambient soundscapes, but to hours-long videos dissecting the deepest mysteries of From Software's masterpiece. These videos, often stretching past the 3, 4, even 6 hour mark, have become a strange new form of comfort media, a way to drift into sleep while voices calmly unravel the cosmic horror and political intrigue woven into every corner of the game's design. The conspiracy theories surrounding Elden Ring are not mere speculation. They represent a collective archaeological effort to excavate meaning from a deliberately obscured narrative, to find patterns in the chaos, to understand why the world is broken and who broke it. They ask uncomfortable questions about the nature of divinity, the ethics of immortality, and whether free will exists in a universe where outer gods manipulate reality itself like pieces on a cosmic board. The theories range from the almost certainly intentional, hidden in plain sight by Hidetaka Miyazaki and George R. Martin, to the wildly speculative, built on the flimsiest of connections and the most generous interpretations of ambiguous imagery. Yet all of them share a common thread. They recognize that nothing in the lands between is as it seems, that every golden promise conceals a rotting truth, and that the player character, the tarnished, may be the most manipulated piece of all. Consider the implications of what we think we know. The greater will, presented as the supreme cosmic force that brought order to chaos, arrived in the lands between as a golden star, or so the stories claim. But what existed before that arrival? The crucible, that primordial melting pot of life, where all things blended together in forms both beautiful and horrifying, was already churning with vitality. The formless mother, the god of blood and wounds, was already whispering to those who would listen. The frenzied flame, that force of absolute annihilation that seeks to melt all distinctions back into primordial unity, was already burning in the depths beneath the world. These powers did not emerge from the greater will's influence. They were already here, already shaping reality according to their own alien logics. So when the greater will arrived, was it truly bringing order to chaos, or was it simply another competitor in an already crowded field of cosmic tyrants? And if the latter, what does that mean for everything that followed? What does it mean for Marika's ascension from mortal flesh to divine essence, for her establishment of the Golden Order, for her decision to shatter the very ring that granted her power? The conspiracy theories suggest that Marika was never truly in control, that her every action was choreographed by forces that saw her not as a goddess, but as a useful tool. They point to the Black Knives, assassins who wielded death itself as a weapon, and ask who truly orchestrated the murder of Godwyn the Golden. Was it Rani, seeking to cast off her Empyrean flesh and chart her own destiny among the stars? Was it Marika herself, engineering the circumstances that would lead to the shattering? Or was it something else entirely? Some outer god or coalition of gods who needed the Golden Order to fracture so that new possibilities could emerge from the cracks? The theories examine Melina, the mysterious maiden who offers accord to the tarnished, who speaks with Marika's words and burns with a purpose she can barely articulate. They note the color of her closed eye, the implications of her dialogue, the way she seems to exist outside the normal flow of cause and effect. Is she Marika's daughter, a fragment of the goddess's will given form? Is she connected to Rani, sharing not just narrative parallels, but perhaps something deeper, some fundamental link in their essences? Or is she something else entirely, an agent of forces we have not yet identified, guiding the tarnished toward an ending that serves agendas we cannot fathom? Then there are the tarnished themselves, the player characters, the exiles who lost their grace and were cast out into lands beyond the fog, only to have that grace returned to them after the shattering. The game presents this as a gift, a second chance, a calling to return and claim lordship over a broken world. But the theories ask darker questions. Why were the tarnished stripped of grace in the first place? Why were they allowed to live when they could have been exterminated? Why were they scattered to distant lands rather than simply imprisoned or executed? The answer, according to the conspiracies, is that the tarnished were never exiles. They were seeds, planted in foreign soil, allowed to grow strong through struggle and hardship, cultivated specifically so that they could be called back at the precise moment when the Golden Order needed to be either restored or replaced. The tarnished are not heroes, they are weapons, forged in the crucible of exile, sharpened by death and resurrection, pointed at targets they do not fully understand by hands they cannot see. Every sight of grace that guides them, every golden arrow that points the way forward, is not a blessing but a leash. Long before the Erdtree cast its golden light across the lands between, long before the greater will imposed its order upon the world, there existed a time so ancient that even the stones themselves have forgotten its true shape. This is the pre-Erdtree era, a period shrouded in mystery and speculation, where the very nature of life itself was fundamentally different from anything we might recognize today. In this primordial age, the lands between were not a realm of distinct kingdoms, warring factions, or even separate living beings as we understand them. Instead, the world existed as what scholars and theorists have come to call the crucible, a primordial soup of unified existence, where all life was one, undifferentiated, and intertwined in ways that challenge our modern comprehension of biology, consciousness, and reality itself. The crucible was not merely a historical period or a geographical location, it was a state of being, a fundamental condition of existence, where the boundaries between one creature and another, between plant and animal, between flesh and spirit, simply did not exist in the way they do now. Imagine, if you can, a world where life itself was a single, vast organism, constantly shifting and reforming, where the concept of individual identity had not yet crystallized into the rigid forms we take for granted. This was the crucible, a cauldron of raw biological potential where every possible form of life existed simultaneously in a state of perpetual flux and transformation. But the crucible did not exist in isolation from the cosmic forces that have always sought to shape the lands between according to their own designs. Even in this ancient era, the influence of the outer gods, those incomprehensible entities that exist beyond the material world, could be felt. Chief among these was the formless mother, an outer god whose very nature embodies the primal power of blood and the raw, untamed violence that flows through all living things. The formless mother's influence predated the arrival of the greater will by eons, and her presence in this primordial age cannot be understated. Where other outer gods would later impose structure and hierarchy, the formless mother reveled in the chaotic, unified nature of the crucible itself. The formless mother's power manifested through what we now recognize as blood flame, that terrible crimson fire that burns not with heat alone, but with the very essence of life itself. In the Crucible era, blood flame was not a weapon or a curse, as it would later become. It was simply another aspect of existence, another thread in the vast tapestry of unified life. The formless mother did not rule the crucible in any conventional sense. She was part of it, woven into its very fabric, her consciousness diffused throughout the primordial soup of existence. Some theorists go further, suggesting that the crucible itself was not a natural state of being at all, but rather a deliberate creation, a grand experiment or manipulation orchestrated by the formless mother herself. According to this interpretation, the unified life of the crucible was the formless mother's vision of perfection, a world where all living things shared in the same blood, the same flesh, the same fundamental essence. Life in the crucible manifested in ways that would seem monstrous or aberrant to modern eyes, but which were perfectly natural in that ancient context. Because all life was unified and undifferentiated, individual organisms, to the extent that they could be called individuals at all, displayed a bewildering array of physical characteristics. Horns sprouted from heads and shoulders. Wings, both feathered and membranous, grew from backs and limbs. Scales covered skin that might also bear fur or chitinous plates. Tails of every conceivable variety extended from spines. These were not mutations or deformities. They were simply the raw, unrefined state of life itself, before the process of specialization and differentiation had begun to sort living things into the distinct categories we know today. Every creature was a chimera, every being a fusion of possibilities. The physical diversity of crucible life reflected a deeper truth about this primordial state. Life in the crucible was not specialized. It had not yet been forced to choose between being one thing or another, between flying or walking, between hunting or grazing. All possibilities existed simultaneously. All potential forms were equally valid and equally present. This was life as pure potential, as raw biological energy not yet channeled into the narrow pathways that evolution and divine intervention would later carve. Even in this ancient, chaotic era, however, there were those who rose to prominence, who distinguished themselves from the unified mass of crucible life. These were the first champions, the earliest warriors, and they would eventually be known to history as the Crucible Knights. These primordial heroes did not merely live in the crucible, they drew power directly from it, channeling the unified life force that permeated all existence. The Crucible Knights were able to manifest aspects of the Crucible's diversity within their own bodies, calling forth bestial limbs when strength was needed, sprouting wings when flight was required, hardening their skin into scales when defense was paramount. They were not shapeshifters in the conventional sense. They were simply tapping into the fundamental nature of crucible life, accessing the vast reservoir of biological potential that existed before specialization had narrowed the possibilities. The armor and weapons of the Crucible Knights reflected their unique relationship with the primordial life force. Their equipment was not forged in the manner of later ages, not crafted according to the rigid principles of metallurgy and design that would come with more ordered times. Instead, their armor seemed to grow, to emerge organically from the crucible itself, as if the unified life force had been convinced to take on a protective form. The golden bronze hue of crucible knight armor, which we can still observe in the rare surviving examples, suggests a connection to something that would later be associated with divine order. Yet in this ancient era, it represented something far more primal and untamed. These crucible knights served what can only be described as a primordial order, though the word order itself may be too structured, too modern a concept to truly apply to this ancient era. There was no single god in the sense that would later be understood, no divine monarch sitting upon a throne and issuing commandments. The order that the Crucible Knights served was the order of the Crucible itself, the natural, chaotic, unified order of undifferentiated life. They were champions of existence in its purest, most unrefined form, defenders of a world where all life was one and where the boundaries between self and other had not yet been drawn. The legacy of the Crucible would not vanish when the age of the Erdtree began. It would persist, encoded in the very flesh and blood of certain beings who would be born in later ages. The omens, those horned and tailed individuals who would be reviled and persecuted in the age of the Golden Order, are nothing less than living embodiments of the Crucible's ancient power. Their horns, their tails, their raw physical strength, all of these are direct manifestations of the Crucible's primordial energy. In this ancient era, before the concept of curse or blessing had been invented by more structured societies, omen physiology was not an aberration. It was simply another expression of the crucible's infinite variety, another thread in the tapestry of unified life. In this primordial age, the crucible's influence meant that life itself was more fluid and less defined than anything we encounter in the lands between today. Creatures born from the crucible exhibited traits that would later be considered monstrous or aberrant by the standards of the Golden Order. These were not mutations or corruptions in the sense we might understand them, but rather the natural expression of the crucible's boundless creative energy. A being might possess scales and feathers simultaneously, or manifest limbs that shifted between forms. The Crucible Knights, who would emerge much later as champions of Godfrey, bore armor adorned with aspects that recalled this ancient vitality, their incantations summoning horns and tails and breath that echoed the primordial state. The misbegotten, those tragic beings enslaved and persecuted in later ages, are themselves living remnants of crucible influence, their wings and bestial features marking them as products of an older, wilder genesis. Even the omens, born with horns and twisted forms, carry within their very bodies the memory of the crucible, though the Golden Order would come to view them as cursed rather than blessed. But the crucible was not the only force shaping this nascent world. The formless mother's influence, channeled through her blood flame, began to subtly shape and corrupt aspects of this primordial life. Where the crucible represented chaotic vitality and endless permutation, the formless mother offered something different, a communion through blood and suffering. Her essence seeped into the world, not as creation, but as transformation through pain and ecstasy. The blood flame she commanded was not merely fire, it was a manifestation of her will, burning with a deep crimson that spoke to the very essence of life itself, the blood that flows through all living things. This ancient influence would lie dormant for ages, waiting for those who would hear her whispers and embrace her gifts. The Mogwin dynasty, which would rise in the far future under Mog, Lord of Blood, drew directly from this wellspring of ancient power. The blood flame incantations practiced by Mog and his followers are not innovations, but rediscoveries, echoes of the formless mother's primordial touch upon the world. When you encounter the blood star, that manifestation of her favor, or witness the grotesque transformations of those who serve her, you are seeing the continuation of a corruption that began before the Erdtree's first golden leaves unfurled. The nascent world during this era was characterized by a chaotic, untamed magic, fundamentally distinct from the later Golden Order incantations that would codify and control supernatural power. This primordial magic was raw, instinctive, and deeply connected to the physical forms it inhabited. There were no carefully structured incantations requiring precise gestures and faith in an abstract order. Instead, magic flowed from the body itself, from horn and scale and claw. The crucible incantations that survive into the present age, those rare and ancient spells that summon aspects like the crucible tail or the breath of the crucible, give us only the faintest glimpse of what this magic truly was. These incantations require significant faith to cast, but they feel different from Golden Order fundamentalism, more visceral, more connected to flesh and transformation. The ancient sorceries, too, may have their roots in this era, though the study of glintstone and the stars would come later. What existed in the Crucible Age was something more primal, magic as an extension of being rather than a studied discipline. Ancient dragons, such as Placidusax, existed during this era, and the question of whether they predated or merely coexisted with the Crucible's peak remains one of the great mysteries of this age. Placidusax, the dragon lord who would later be found in Farum Azula, outside the flow of time itself, was Elden Lord in an age before the Erdtree, serving a god who would eventually flee the lands between. The ancient dragons were beings of stone and lightning, their scales harder than any metal, their power derived from the storms they commanded. Gravel stone, that peculiar material found in their scales, seems to exist partially outside normal physical laws, and the ancient dragon smithing stones crafted from it are among the most powerful materials in all the lands between. The relationship between the ancient dragons and the crucible is unclear. Did the crucible birth them as it birthed other life, or did they arrive from elsewhere, perhaps from the same cosmic realm that gave rise to the Elden Beast and the Greater Will? The fact that Placidusax was Elden Lord suggests that the Elden Ring, or something like it, existed even in this ancient time, that there was already a cosmic order being imposed upon the world, even as the crucible churned with chaotic life. Perhaps the ancient dragons represented an early attempt to bring structure to chaos, their stone like permanence a counterweight to the crucible's endless flux. The concept of death as a distinct, final state was likely less defined in the crucible, where life and form were constantly shifting. In an age where beings could transform, where the boundaries between species were fluid, where did life end and death begin? The death birds, those ancient creatures associated with the twin bird and ghost flame, may have already been present, serving as psychopomps for whatever death meant in this era. But death, as we understand it, as a permanent cessation enforced by the rune of death, would not be codified until much later, when Marika would remove destined death from the Elden Ring and seal it away. In the Crucible Age, what we might call death could have been simply another transformation, another permutation of form. A being might dissolve back into the primordial soup of life, its essence recycled into new forms. This would explain why the Crucible was so fecund, so endlessly creative. Nothing was truly lost, only changed. The ghost flame of the deathbirds, that cold fire that burns the soul rather than the body, may represent a form of death that predates destined death, a spiritual dissolution rather than a physical one. The Helfin, that ghost flame steeple we find in the lands between, and the incantations associated with the deathbirds, speak to an ancient relationship with death that the Golden Order would later suppress and replace with its own doctrines. The Crucible's raw power was later suppressed and deemed impure by the Golden Order, a tragic reversal that led directly to the persecution of omens and the marginalization of all things connected to the primordial age. When Marika established the Golden Order and the Erdtree became the central symbol of her reign, the chaotic vitality of the Crucible was reframed as corruption. The very traits that had once been natural expressions of life's diversity became marks of shame. Omens, born with horns and twisted features, were hidden away in the depths beneath Lindel, their horns cruelly excised in a practice that often proved fatal. Morgott and Mog, both sons of Queen Marika herself, were imprisoned beneath the capital simply for bearing the marks of the Crucible. The misbegotten were enslaved, forced to labor in Castle Morn and elsewhere, their wings and bestial features justification for their subjugation. The Crucible Knights, once honored warriors, became relics of a bygone age, their connection to the primordial power viewed with suspicion. This suppression was not merely aesthetic or philosophical. By deeming the Crucible impure, the Golden Order sought to consolidate its own power, to present itself as the only legitimate source of divine grace. Anything that predated the Erdtree, anything that suggested the world had been whole and vital before Marika's reign, was a threat to the Order's claim of absolute authority. The Formless Mother's blood flame incantations, like those wielded by Mugwin's followers, are a direct echo of her ancient influence on the world, preserved through the ages by those who rejected the Golden Order's strictures. The Bloody Finger incantations, the Blood Boon ritual, the Blood Flame blade, all of these draw upon the same power that touched the world in its infancy. The Formless Mother's gift is communion through blood, a binding that transcends the individual and creates a collective ecstasy of suffering and devotion. This is why Mog's followers are so fanatical, where they willingly shed their blood in her name. They are tapping into something older than the Erdtree, older than the Golden Order, a primordial force that promises transformation through pain. The Crucible's legacy persists in various forms throughout the lands between, from omen physiology to certain ancient incantations and the very land itself. The earth remembers. The horns that sprout from omens, the wings of the misbegotten, the aspects summoned by crucible knights, all testify to the enduring power of the primordial age. Even the Erdtree itself, some scholars suggest, may have roots that reach down into the crucible, drawing sustenance from that ancient wellspring of life, even as it imposes order upon chaos. In the ancient past of the lands between, after the age of the primordial crucible had shaped the world into a place of chaotic vitality and blended life, a new force arrived that would fundamentally alter the course of history. The exact timing remains lost to the mists of time, but scholars and those who study the fragmentary records agree that this moment marks the beginning of what would become the Golden Order's dominion. A golden star fell from the heavens, streaking across the sky in a display that would have been visible across the entire realm. This was no ordinary celestial body. This star carried with it the influence of the greater will, an outer god of immense power whose nature revolves around the concept of order itself, a cosmic force that seeks to impose structure, hierarchy, and control upon the natural chaos of existence. Within this golden star traveled the Elden Beast, a living vassal of the greater will, sent as its direct emissary to the lands between. The Elden Beast was not merely a creature or a simple messenger. It embodied the very essence of order that the greater will wished to establish. When you encounter this entity in its final form, you witness something that appears almost aquatic, swimming through the air with an otherworldly grace, its body shimmering with golden light and cosmic energy. This being brought with it the Elden Ring itself, the fundamental set of runes and laws that would govern reality in the lands between. The ring was not a physical object in the traditional sense, but rather a metaphysical framework, a collection of great runes that dictated the rules by which life, death, and existence itself would function under the greater will's design. From the site where this golden star made its impact, something miraculous and terrible began to grow. The Erdtree, that massive golden tree, visible from nearly every corner of the lands between, started its ascent toward the heavens. The tree's growth was not natural in any conventional sense. It drew power directly from the land itself, sending roots deep into the earth, tapping into the vital energies that had once fed the crucible's chaotic fusions. Where the crucible had allowed life to blend and merge in unpredictable ways, the Erdtree imposed order and hierarchy. Its roots spread beneath the surface like a vast network, reaching into every corner of the realm, establishing a connection that some interpret as nurturing and others view as parasitic. The tree grew at a pace that defied natural law, reaching toward the sky as if attempting to bridge the gap between the earthly realm and the cosmic domain of the greater will itself. As the Erd tree established itself, so too did the Golden Order, a comprehensive system of belief, law, and metaphysical truth that would replace the older ways of understanding the world. The Golden Order was not simply a religion or a political structure, though it encompassed both. It was a complete reimagining of reality's fundamental rules. Under the Golden Order, death would no longer be a natural transition, but something controlled and regulated. Souls would return to the Erd tree upon death, their essence absorbed into the great tree, to be reborn in a cycle that the greater will could oversee and manage. This stood in stark contrast to the older belief systems that had venerated the crucible, where death and life intermingled freely, where the boundaries between different forms of existence remained fluid and permeable. The worship of the crucible, which had once been central to the spiritual life of the lands between, found itself gradually suppressed under the new order. Those aspects of life that the crucible had celebrated, the horns and wings and tails that emerged from the blending of different life forms, were slowly reclassified. What had once been seen as blessings or natural expressions of the crucible's vitality became marks of something primitive, something that needed to be overcome or hidden. The crucible knights, who had once been honored warriors bearing these primordial aspects, found their status diminished over time. Siluria and Ordovis, two of the most renowned crucible knights, would eventually serve the Golden Order, but the very aspects they bore, the physical manifestations of the crucible's power, would come to be viewed with suspicion and distaste by those fully committed to the Golden Order's vision of perfection and purity. The Erd tree itself became the source of grace, a golden light that would emanate from the tree and manifest in the eyes of chosen individuals. This grace served multiple functions within the greater will's design. It acted as a guide, showing the tarnished and others the path they should follow, appearing as golden light that pointed toward specific locations or objectives. Grace also bestowed blessings, strengthening those who possessed it and marking them as favored by the Golden Order. Sites of grace, those checkpoints you discover throughout your journey in the lands between, represent locations where this power pools and concentrates, places where the Erd tree's influence manifests strongly enough to provide rest and restoration. The grace in one's eyes became a mark of status and purpose, a visible sign that the greater will had chosen that individual for some role in its grand design. To interpret the greater will's intentions and communicate its desires to the mortal realm, the two fingers were established as direct conduits. These entities, which appear as massive, gnarled pairs of fingers emerging from the ground or attached to withered hands, serve as intermediaries between the cosmic force of the greater will and the inhabitants of the lands between. Each major location of power has its own finger reader, individuals who can interpret the subtle movements and gestures of the two fingers and translate them into guidance for those seeking the greater will's wisdom. The two fingers at the round table hold, for instance, would play a crucial role in guiding tarnished warriors toward the goal of becoming Elden Lord, though the accuracy and honesty of their interpretations would later come into question by those who delved deeper into the nature of the Golden Order. The greater will needed mortal agents to enact its will upon the physical world, and so it chose a lineage to rule in its name. Queen Marika the Eternal was selected, elevated from whatever origins she possessed to become the vessel of the Elden Ring itself. Marika was not merely a queen in the political sense, she became the living embodiment of the Golden Order's principles, her body literally containing the Elden Ring within it. Through Marika, the golden lineage was established, a family of demigods who would inherit portions of the Elden Ring's power in the form of great runes. These demigods, Marika's children by various consorts, would become the rulers and champions of the Golden Order, each wielding tremendous power derived directly from the fundamental laws of reality itself. Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn, would become the ideal exemplar of this lineage, beloved and powerful, representing everything the Golden Order claimed to offer. Yet even as the Erdtree grew and the Golden Order established its dominance, certain observers began to notice troubling patterns. The Erdtree's sap, that golden substance that flowed from the tree and was said to grant blessings and longevity, had properties that some found disturbing. Those who consumed it or were blessed by it seemed to change over time, their bodies taking on a golden hue, their flesh becoming harder, almost crystalline. The grace that guided and blessed could also be withdrawn, casting individuals out as tarnished, stripping them of their purpose and exiling them from the lands between entirely. The Erdtree's growth, magnificent as it appeared, came at a profound cost to the lands between. As the great golden tree expanded, its roots burrowing ever deeper into the earth, it began to function less as a source of life and more as a vast, insatiable drain. The tree absorbed the energy of the land itself, drawing up the vital essence from soil, stone, and the very souls of those who died beneath its boughs. When living beings perished in the lands between, their spirits were meant to return to the Erdtree, to be absorbed into its golden light and theoretically redistributed. But many scholars and heretical thinkers began to question whether this redistribution ever truly occurred, or whether the Erdtree simply hoarded this spiritual energy, growing ever more radiant while the land itself withered. The grace grew less vibrant in regions where the roots ran deepest. Springs that had flowed for millennia began to slow to trickles. Ancient forests that predated the Erdtree's arrival found their own root systems strangled by the golden invader, their leaves turning from green to pale gold before falling entirely. This gradual depletion would contribute to the eventual stagnation that plagued the lands between, a slow death by golden light. This observation leads directly into one of the most controversial theories whispered in the darkest corners of the Round Table Hold and scrawled in forbidden texts hidden from the eyes of Golden Order fundamentalists. The theory posits that the greater will is not the benevolent cosmic deity it presents itself to be, but rather a parasitic entity, an outer god that functions more like a cosmic predator than a divine parent. According to this interpretation, the greater will identified the lands between as a rich feeding ground, a realm teeming with life and spiritual energy ripe for harvest. The Elden Ring itself, in this reading, becomes less a gift and more a control mechanism, a means by which the greater will could restructure the fundamental laws of reality to suit its own needs. The Erdtree serves as both a beacon to attract worship and a literal siphon to extract the life force of an entire world. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that the greater will communicates only through intermediaries, the two fingers, strange and alien beings whose true nature remains deeply mysterious. They note that the greater will's commands always serve to perpetuate the existing order, to maintain the flow of souls into the Erdtree, and to prevent any change that might disrupt this carefully constructed system of extraction. If the greater will were truly benevolent, they argue, why would it demand such absolute obedience? Why would it structure reality itself to prevent natural death and rebirth, instead funneling all spiritual energy into a single golden repository? The greater will's consolidation of power required the active suppression of rival outer gods and their followers throughout the lands between. Before the Erdtree's ascent, the lands had been home to numerous divine influences, each with their own adherents and domains of power. The fell god of the fire giants commanded the flame atop the mountain tops of the giants, a primal force that predated golden light. The formless mother, an outer god of blood and wounds, had her own devotees who understood divinity through pain and sacrifice. The god of rot, sealed beneath the earth in the lake of rot, represented decay and renewal through decomposition, a natural cycle antithetical to the Erdtree's promise of eternal golden life. The dark moon and the full moon held sway over those who studied sorcery, and the stars, representing a cosmic order entirely separate from the greater will's terrestrial dominion. The frenzied flame, perhaps the most chaotic of all outer gods, offered a vision of reality burned clean of all distinction and suffering. As the Golden Order solidified its control, each of these rival powers faced systematic persecution. The fire giants were hunted to near extinction, their flame carefully contained but never fully extinguished, for prophecy held that the flame could burn the Erdtree itself. The blood cultists were driven underground, forced to practice their rites in hidden caves and forgotten catacombs. The servants of Rot were sealed away, their goddess imprisoned in a divine prison beneath the earth. Astrologers and sorcerers found their arts increasingly marginalized, labeled as heretical when they contradicted Golden Order doctrine. This was not mere religious intolerance, but a calculated campaign to eliminate any power structure that might challenge the greater will's monopoly on divinity. Central to the greater will's restructuring of reality was Marika's sealing of destined death, an act that fundamentally altered the nature of existence in the lands between. Destined death, embodied in the rune of death, represented the natural order of mortality, the principle that all things must eventually end and return to the cosmic cycle. Under the greater will's influence, whether through direct command or subtle manipulation, Queen Marika removed this rune from the Elden Ring and entrusted it to her shadow, Malekith, a beast of tremendous power bound to protect and contain it. With destined death sealed away, the inhabitants of the lands between could no longer truly die. Their souls would return to the Erdtree upon the death of their bodies, and in theory, they could be reborn, granted life again in an endless cycle. The demigods, Marika's own children, became truly immortal, unable to be permanently slain no matter how grievous their wounds. This seemed, on its surface, to be a tremendous gift, the conquest of mortality itself, the answer to humanity's oldest fear. But the removal of death had profound and disturbing consequences. Without the possibility of true ending, life lost much of its meaning. Beings could not move on, could not find rest, could not make way for new generations with new ideas. The lands between became locked in an eternal present, unable to evolve or change. Those who suffered could not escape their suffering through death's release. Those who committed atrocities could not be truly removed from the world. The sealing of destined death was perhaps the greater will's masterstroke, ensuring that the cycle of souls flowing into the Erdtree could never be broken, that its harvest could continue forever without interruption. The Golden Order's tenets, codified by Marika and her scholars, reflected this philosophy of eternal stasis. The Golden Order fundamentalism that emerged as the dominant religious and philosophical framework emphasized rigid hierarchy, absolute obedience to established law, and the inherent superiority of gold over all other elements and influences. Change was not merely discouraged, but actively opposed as a form of heresy. The natural cycles of growth and decay were replaced with the artificial permanence of golden light. External influences, whether from other outer gods, from the primordial crucible that had given rise to early life, or from the stars themselves, were to be rejected and suppressed. The Golden Order taught that perfection had been achieved, that the current structure of reality represented the ideal state, and that any deviation from this state was corruption. Scholars of the Golden Order spent their lives not discovering new truths, but elaborating on existing doctrine, finding new ways to express the same fundamental principles of hierarchy and stasis. Incantations, the miracle-like spells drawn from faith in the Erdtree, were carefully controlled and categorized, with certain types of magic deemed acceptable and others forbidden. Even the study of history became suspect, for the past might contain knowledge of times before the Golden Order, times when other possibilities existed. The Erdtree's roots, meanwhile, continued their inexorable spread throughout every region of the lands between. These roots were not merely physical structures, but spiritual conduits, connections that allowed the Erdtree to draw power from all life within its reach. In Limgrave, roots broke through the earth in great golden arches. In Liurnia, they reached beneath the lakes, drawing power even from the water itself. In Caelid, they would later become twisted and corrupted, but even in their corrupted state, they maintained their function as channels of energy. The roots connected to the catacombs where the dead were interred, ensuring that even those buried in the earth would have their souls drawn upward into the tree. They connected to minor Erdtrees that sprouted throughout the land, smaller golden trees that served as regional focal points for the greater will's influence. They even reached into the underground realms, the Siofra River and Ansel River regions, ancient spaces that predated the Erdtree's arrival, colonizing these primordial places with golden light. Through this vast root network, the Erdtree achieved a form of omnipresence, touching every corner of the lands between, leaving no space untouched by the Greater Will's influence. The Greater Will's arrival and the Erdtree's ascent marked a fundamental transition in the history of the lands between, a shift from a more chaotic, primordial era to one of enforced cosmic order. Before the Greater Will, the lands had been wild, shaped by the crucible of life, where all forms mixed together in glorious and terrible combinations. Dragons ruled the skies, giants commanded flame, and the very nature of life was fluid and experimental. It was an age of possibility, but also of danger, where power was contested and nothing was permanent. The greater will replaced this primordial chaos with structure, hierarchy, and the promise of eternal stability. Some undoubtedly welcomed this change, finding security in the Golden Order's promises. But others, particularly those who remembered or revered the older ways, saw it as a form of cosmic tyranny, the replacement of natural chaos with artificial control. The Erdtree's golden light became the dominant visual and spiritual element across the lands between, its radiance visible from every region, its influence inescapable. Where once the night sky had been filled with stars, now the Erdtree's glow dimmed their light. Where once diverse forms of life had flourished according to their own natures, now all life was expected to conform to the Golden Order's vision of perfection. The age of the Erdtree had truly begun, and the lands between would never be the same. As the age of the Erdtree, a period defined by the Golden Order, truly began to blossom, we find ourselves watching the ascent of Queen Marika, a figure whose influence would irrevocably shape the lands between. Following the establishment of the Erdtree by the Greater Will, an outer god of immense power and influence, Marika was chosen as its vessel. This divine selection marked her as the central figure of the New World Order. She became the very embodiment of the Elden Ring, the fundamental concept of the world's order and a physical manifestation of the Greater Will's power. This bestowed upon her unimaginable authority and the ability to dictate the laws of reality within the lands between. With her newfound power and divine mandate, Marika wasted no time in establishing the Golden Order. This was not merely a religious doctrine, but a comprehensive system of governance, philosophy, and even biology, designed to enforce the tenets of the Greater Will across the entire continent. Its core principles revolved around the belief in a singular, divine order, the rejection of other outer gods, and the promotion of life through the Erdtree's grace. Marika, as its living embodiment, ensured its strict adherence, shaping societies, cultures, and even the very landscape to conform to its ideals. This era saw the flourishing of the Golden Lineage, the demigod offspring of Marika, and the expansion of the Erdtree's influence, promising an age of prosperity and unwavering order. A crucial and arguably the most impactful decision made by Marika during this period involved the concept of destined death. Originally, death was a natural and integral part of the cycle of life in the lands between. However, Marika, under the influence of the Greater Will, sought to remove it from the Elden Ring. To achieve this, she entrusted her shadow-bound beast, Malekith, the Black Blade, with the formidable task of sealing destined death. Malekith, a loyal and immensely powerful warrior, was given the rune of death, the very essence of mortality, and bound it within his own blade. This act fundamentally altered the natural order, making true death a rarity and leading to the phenomenon of those touched by grace returning from death, albeit often in a diminished state. This policy of removing destined death from the cycle was a cornerstone of the Golden Order, intended to foster an eternal, unchanging world under the Erdtree's dominion. To further solidify her reign and the Golden Order's power, Marika took Godfrey, the mightiest warrior of his age, as her consort. Godfrey, known for his ferocity and unwavering strength, became the first Elden Lord. Together, they formed a powerful alliance, both political and martial, leading the charge against any who opposed the Golden Order's expansion. Their union was fruitful, blessing them with several demigod children, including Godwyn the Golden, Morgoth the Omen King, and Mog, Lord of Blood. These children, born of a god and a powerful human, inherited immense strength and played significant roles in the unfolding history of the lands between, though their fates would diverge dramatically. Godfrey's prowess as a warrior and his leadership of the Tarnished, a formidable army of heroes, were instrumental in conquering the diverse factions of the lands between and bringing them under the Golden Order's sway. However, even the most powerful alliances can unravel. After fulfilling his purpose of conquering and unifying the lands between under the Golden Order, Godfrey and his tarnished warriors were eventually exiled by Marika. The reasons for this exile are complex and shrouded in mystery, but it appears to have been a deliberate act by Marika to remove those who had fulfilled their martial purpose. Their grace, the blessing of the Erdtree that allowed them to return from death, was stripped away, and they were cast out from the lands between, destined to wander the outside lands. This act, while seemingly harsh, can be interpreted as Marika's attempt to maintain a pure, unblemished golden order, free from the constant need for warfare and conquest. She may have believed that with the lands between unified, the era of warriors like Godfrey was over, and a new, more refined form of governance was required. This exile, however, would have far-reaching consequences, setting the stage for the Tarnished's eventual return. Following Godfrey's departure, Marika made another astonishing move that further consolidated the Golden Order's power and revealed a deeper truth about her own nature. She married Radagon, her male alter ego. This was not a separate individual, but a different aspect of Marika herself, a revelation that would later shock the inhabitants of the lands between. Radagon, a champion of the Golden Order and a powerful sorcerer, had previously been married to Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, and had fathered several demigod children with her, including Rykard, Radon, and Rani. His marriage to Marika effectively merged the two most powerful figures in the lands between, creating an ultimate singular authority. This union further cemented the Golden Order's dominance, eliminating any potential rival power structures and presenting an image of unwavering, unified divine rule. The implications of Marika and Radagon being one and the same are profound, suggesting a complex, multifaceted deity rather than a simple monarch. The seemingly unshakable foundation of the Golden Order, however, was about to be rocked by a cataclysmic event known as the Night of the Black Knives. This was a meticulously planned assassination plot targeting demigods, an act of sacrilege that would shatter the peace of the lands between and initiate a chain of events leading to the ultimate collapse of the Golden Order. The precise motivations behind this night of terror remain a subject of intense debate and speculation among scholars of the lands between, but its impact was undeniable and immediate. The first and most devastating casualty of the Night of the Black Knives was Godwyn the Golden, the beloved firstborn son of Marika and Godfrey. His death was unique and horrifying. His soul was murdered while his body remained. This unprecedented form of death, a soul death without a corresponding bodily demise, left his physical form corrupted and festering, a grotesque monument to the knight's atrocities. This act of soul murder was a direct consequence of the rune of death being stolen and partially unleashed, allowing a specific, targeted form of death to occur. Godwin's fate would forever haunt the lands between, his soulless body becoming a source of blight and despair, influencing the very landscape and contributing to the growing instability. The perpetrators of this heinous act were identified as the Black Knives, a shadowy group of Numen assassins. The Numen were an ancient race, distinct from humans, known for their skill in stealth and their close ties to the Empyreans, individuals chosen by the greater will to potentially succeed Marika. The involvement of such a specialized and enigmatic group immediately raised suspicions, leading many to believe that the Night of the Black Knives was not a random act of rebellion, but a carefully orchestrated plot. The most unsettling and persistent theory, one that sends shivers down the spines of even the most hardened scholars, suggests that the assassinations occurred potentially at Marika's behest. This theory posits that Marika, for reasons yet unknown, may have desired to initiate a profound change in the lands between, and the death of her own son in such a peculiar manner was a necessary, albeit horrific step in her grand design. The idea that the very queen who established the Golden Order would orchestrate such a devastating event against her own lineage is a testament to the complex and often contradictory nature of divine power and ambition in the lands between. The Night of the Black Knives, therefore, was not just an assassination, but a deliberate act of cosmic disruption, a carefully placed domino that would eventually topple the entire Golden Order. While the Night of Black Knives saw Godwin's body perish, it is crucial to understand that another demigod, Rani the Witch, orchestrated a parallel event on that very same night. Rani, a daughter of Radagon and Renala, and thus a stepdaughter of Marika, sought to escape the fate prescribed for her by the Greater Will, an outer god that exerted its influence over the lands between. The Greater Will, it is believed, had designated Rani to succeed Marika as the next Empyrean, a chosen individual capable of becoming a god. Rani, however, vehemently rejected this destiny, desiring true freedom from the influence of any outer god. To achieve this, she conspired with the Black Knife Assassins, a shadowy group of Numen women, to have her own body killed by a fragment of the Rune of Death, just as Godwin's soul was killed. This act, known as the Night of the Black Knives, was a ritual of dualistic assassination, a complex, magical feat. While Godwin's soul was slain, leaving his body intact and corrupted, Rani's body was killed, yet her spirit remained. This severance of spirit from flesh allowed Rani to shed her Empyrean flesh and inhabit a spectral, doll-like form, effectively freeing her from the Greater Will's direct control and the predetermined path it had laid out for her. The motivations behind Marika's subsequent shattering of the Elden Ring are, to this day, among the most fiercely debated topics in all of Lands Between history. The act itself was cataclysmic, a fundamental alteration of reality, and the reasons for such an extreme measure are shrouded in mystery and conflicting interpretations. One prevalent theory posits that Marika acted not as a free agent, but under duress or as a mere puppet of the Greater Will. Proponents of this view point to the inherent power imbalance between a god and an outer god. The Greater Will, having established the Golden Order and elevated Marika to godhood, possessed immense influence, if not outright control, over her actions. Perhaps Marika was compelled to shatter the ring as part of a larger, inscrutable plan by the greater will, a plan whose ultimate purpose remains unknown to mortals. This perspective suggests that Marika's apparent rebellion was, in fact, a preordained step in a cosmic design, a necessary destruction to pave the way for a new order, or perhaps a test of the lands between's resilience. The very nature of the greater will, often described as an indifferent, cosmic entity communicating through its vassal, the two fingers, lends credence to the idea that its motives are beyond human comprehension, and its actions, even seemingly destructive ones, might serve a grander alien purpose. Conversely, a powerful counter theory suggests that Marika deliberately shattered the Elden Ring as an act of defiance, a desperate bid to free herself, and perhaps the entire lands between, from the oppressive control of the greater will. This interpretation paints Marika as a tragic hero, a god who grew disillusioned with her role and the rigid dogma of the Golden Order. Evidence supporting this theory lies in Marika's own cryptic pronouncements, often hinting at a desire for change and a questioning of the established order. Her lamentations about the unchanging nature of the Golden Order and her apparent yearning for a new age, even one born from destruction, suggest a deep seated dissatisfaction. The Golden Order, while bringing prosperity, also enforced a strict hierarchy and suppressed alternative beliefs. Marika, having witnessed the rise and fall of various factions and the suffering caused by the constant struggle for dominance, may have concluded that the only way to break free from this cycle was to dismantle the very foundation of the greater will's power, the Elden Ring itself. This act would be a profound sacrifice, an intentional self sabotage to achieve a greater, albeit chaotic, freedom. The shattering of the Elden Ring was not a singular, instantaneous event, but rather a catastrophic rupture that sent shockwaves across the lands between. The Elden Ring, the very embodiment of the Golden Order's principles and the physical manifestation of the greater will's influence, fractured into numerous pieces. These fragments, imbued with immense power, became known as the Great Runes. Each great rune represented a fundamental aspect of the Elden Ring's original power, and their scattering signified the breakdown of the established order and the descent into chaos. The very fabric of reality was rent, and the guiding principles that had governed the lands between for centuries were undone. The immediate consequence of this audacious act was swift and severe punishment for Marika. The greater will, enraged by her defiance and the destruction of its primary tool of control, imprisoned her within the heart of the Erdtree. This gilded, colossal tree, once a symbol of life and the Golden Order's benevolence, became Marika's gilded cage. Her imprisonment was not merely physical, it was a profound spiritual confinement, a state of perpetual agony and isolation, a stark warning to any who dared to challenge the will of an outer god. The Erdtree, once a source of grace and prosperity, now stood as a monument to Marika's rebellion and the greater will's unforgiving retribution. With the Elden Ring shattered and Marika imprisoned, a power vacuum of unprecedented scale emerged. The great runes, scattered across the lands between, became objects of immense desire and contention. Marika and Radagon's demigod children, each possessing a lineage tied to the shattered divinity, saw an opportunity to claim these fragments, and by extension, a claim to power and the potential to become the next Elden Lord. These demigods, each a formidable warrior or sorcerer in their own right, were driven by ambition, a thirst for power, and a belief in their inherent right to rule. They were not united in their goals, however, and their individual desires quickly clashed, leading to widespread conflict. The ensuing war between these powerful demigods became known as the Shattering. This cataclysmic conflict plunged the lands between into an era of unprecedented chaos and destruction. Each demigod, having claimed one or more great runes, wielded immense power, and their armies clashed across the land, leaving devastation in their wake. Godric the Grafted, obsessed with power, grafted the limbs of fallen warriors onto his own body. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, retreated into the academy of Raya Lucaria, her grief over Radagon's departure manifesting in a desperate attempt to rebirth her children. Radon, the Star Scourge, a mighty general, held back the very stars with his colossal strength, fearing the influence of outer gods. Millennia, Blade of Miquella, a peerless warrior afflicted by the scarlet rot, fought with a fierce determination, her battles leaving indelible scars on the landscape. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, embraced a monstrous serpent god, seeking to devour the very gods themselves. Morgoth, the Omen King, despite his cursed birth, fiercely defended the Erdtree, a loyal but tragic figure. Mog, Lord of Blood, sought to establish a new dynasty with Miquella, pursuing a dark and forbidden path. The Shattering was a prolonged and brutal war, characterized by immense magical battles, widespread bloodshed, and the systematic destruction of once thriving regions. Entire cities were razed, landscapes were scarred by magical energies, and countless lives were lost. The very concept of order and governance dissolved, replaced by a brutal struggle for dominance. The grace of the Erdtree, once freely bestowed, became a rare and sought-after commodity, its guidance fractured and obscured by the pervasive conflict. The lands between, once a realm of divine order and prosperity under the Golden Order, descended into a fractured, war-torn wasteland, a testament to the devastating consequences of ambition, divine intervention, and the shattering of a god's will. This era of relentless warfare and profound instability would ultimately set the stage for the arrival of the tarnished you many centuries later. We've explored the initial rise of the Golden Order and the cosmic upheaval that fractured the very fabric of reality. Now, as our timeline progresses to the pivotal Night of the Black Knives, an event intricately linked to the Shattering itself, we delve into a conspiracy that reshaped the lands between and set the stage for your arrival, tarnished. This era marks a critical turning point, revealing the hidden machinations behind the apparent chaos. The Greater Will, that enigmatic, unseen cosmic entity, had long chosen Marika as its vessel, an Empyrean of immense power and divine connection. Empyreans, for those unfamiliar, are beings of extraordinary potential, chosen by the Greater Will to potentially succeed Marika as the next god of the lands between. Marika, through her union with Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, had established the Golden Order as the dominant faith and political structure. Their union was fruitful, producing numerous offspring, demigods who inherited a portion of their parents' divine essence. These demigods, like Godwyn the Golden, were instrumental in solidifying the Golden Order's dominion, leading campaigns that brought the various factions of the lands between under its sway. The Golden Lineage, as it became known, represented the pinnacle of the Greater Will's influence, promising an era of eternal prosperity and order. Marika, as its figurehead, was both a divine monarch and a living embodiment of the Golden Order's principles, her word law, her power absolute. Her children, therefore, were seen as extensions of this divine mandate, their lives intertwined with the destiny of the lands between. However, not all Empyreans were content with their preordained fates. Enter Rani, an Empyrean daughter of Radagon, Marika's second consort, and Renala, queen of the full moon. Unlike her half siblings of the golden lineage, Rani felt a profound constraint, a stifling sense of destiny imposed upon her by the greater will. She yearned for freedom from the influence of the Two Fingers, the direct emissaries of the greater will who groomed Empyreans for their divine succession. Rani desired a path of her own choosing, a future where fate was not dictated by an external cosmic entity. Her ambition was not merely to defy, but to redefine, to usher in an age free from the rigid dogma of the Golden Order. This yearning for self-determination would become the driving force behind her actions, leading her down a path of rebellion and shadowed conspiracy. She saw the Golden Order not as a benevolent system, but as a gilded cage, and herself as a prisoner within it. Her ultimate goal was to replace the Golden Order with her own vision, an age of stars, where the influence of the greater will would wane, and individuals would be free to chart their own course, guided by the silent wisdom of the cosmos, rather than the insistent whispers of an outer god. Rani, in her quest for liberation, learned of a forbidden power, the Rune of Death, a potent fragment of the Elden Ring that had been sealed away within Malekith, the Black Blade. Malekith, Marika's shadow-bound beast and half-brother, was the keeper of this dangerous power, tasked with preventing its reintroduction into the world. The Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death, was the very force that allowed for true mortality, the finality of existence. Its removal from the Elden Ring, orchestrated by Marika herself in the distant past, had rendered the demigods and many inhabitants of the lands between effectively immortal, albeit susceptible to injury and sickness. This state of undeath, while seemingly a blessing, also prevented true change and ultimate closure. Rani understood that to truly break free from the Golden Order's grip, she needed to reintroduce death, not as a destructive force, but as a catalyst for a new beginning. She sought not to wield the Rune of Death for indiscriminate destruction, but to utilize its power in a precise and calculated manner to achieve her revolutionary aims. She viewed its absence as a perversion of the natural order, a stagnation that prevented a true evolution. With this knowledge, Rani began to conspire with a shadowy organization known as the Black Knife Assassins. These assassins were a group of Numen, an ancient and mysterious race distinct from humans, known for their longevity and their connection to the eternal cities. The Numen, often depicted as having pale skin and long, slender forms, possessed a unique affinity for stealth and deadly precision. Their origins are shrouded in mystery, but their skills as assassins were unparalleled. Rani's choice of allies was not arbitrary. The Black Knife Assassins were not merely mercenaries. There is a compelling theory, supported by in-game item descriptions and lore fragments, that the Black Knife Assassins were, in fact, Marika's kin, perhaps even her direct descendants, or a closely related branch of the Numen. This theory suggests a deeper, more unsettling layer to the conspiracy, implying Marika's complicity or even direct involvement in the events that unfolded. If the assassins were indeed related to Marika, it raises profound questions about her true intentions and her complex relationship with the Golden Order she ostensibly championed. Was she, like Rani, seeking to undermine the greater will, but through more subtle and manipulative means? This possibility adds a layer of intrigue to the entire narrative, painting Marika not as a monolithic figure of divine authority, but as a complex and perhaps conflicted entity. Driven by her ambition and aided by her Numen conspirators, Rani successfully stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith's keeping. This was no easy feat. Malekith, the Black Blade, was a formidable guardian, his loyalty to Marika absolute, his power immense. The act of stealing even a fragment of the Rune of Death from him would have required immense cunning, precise planning, and perhaps even a diversion of epic proportions. The exact details of how Rani managed this audacious heist remain somewhat elusive, but it speaks volumes about her determination and the effectiveness of her clandestine network. The stolen fragment, though small, contained immense power, enough to ignite the flames of a revolution. It was this fragment that Rani then imbued into the Black Knife's daggers, transforming ordinary blades into instruments of true, destined death. These daggers, now glowing with a faint, ominous light, possess the ability to bypass the immortality granted by the absence of the Rune of Death, making even demigods vulnerable to a final, irrevocable end. This act of imbuing the daggers was a crucial step, preparing the tools for the fateful night that would forever alter the course of the lands between. And so, on the night of the Black Knives, the Numen assassins, armed with their death-imbued blades, executed their chilling plan. Their target, Godwyn the Golden, the firstborn son of Marika and Godfrey, the beloved demigod who embodied the Golden Order's glory. The assassination of Godwyn was not merely an act of violence, it was a symbolic strike at the heart of the Golden Order itself. Godwyn was not just a powerful warrior, he was a symbol of hope, a paragon of virtue, and his death sent shockwaves across the lands between. The Black Knives, utilizing their stealth and the newfound power of their daggers, ambushed Godwyn, dealing him a fatal blow. However, the nature of his death was peculiar. While his soul was slain, his body remained a grotesque testament to the incomplete nature of the Rune of Death's return. This partial death, where the soul perished but the body persisted, would have profound and unforeseen consequences, giving rise to the phenomenon of those who live in death. This tragic event, the murder of Godwyn the Golden, was the direct catalyst for the shattering, sparking the devastating war that would tear the lands between asunder and ultimately lead to the Tarnished's return. The Night of the Black Knives was not just a single assassination. It was the opening salvo in a cosmic war, a calculated act of rebellion designed to shatter the very foundations of the existing order. The reverberations of this single night would continue to echo through the ages, shaping the destiny of every inhabitant of the lands between and ultimately your own journey, Tarnished. The very fabric of existence in the lands between was irrevocably torn asunder on the night of the Black Knives, a night that saw not one, but two profound deaths, meticulously orchestrated, it is believed, to serve a singular arcane purpose. While Godwyn the Golden, the firstborn demigod child of Queen Marika and Godfrey, was brutally murdered by the Black Knife assassins, his soul extinguished, yet his body left intact, a grotesque mockery of life. A parallel, equally disturbing event unfolded. Simultaneously, Rani the Witch, an Empyrean daughter of Radagon and Renala, and a demigod herself, utilized the very same stolen rune of death's power to kill her own Empyrean flesh. This was not a random act of self harm, but a calculated ritualistic suicide designed not to end her existence, but to transcend it. Rani's ultimate objective in this macabre ballet of death was to shed her physical Empyrean form, thereby liberating herself from the insidious influence of the greater will. The greater will, an outer god, was the supreme cosmic entity that had chosen Marika as its vessel and Rani as an Empyrean, destined to potentially succeed Marika as a god. Empyreans, born of a single god or possessing a specific divine lineage, were inherently bound to the greater will's dictates, their destinies preordained. Rani, however, harbored a deep-seated resentment for this imposed fate, yearning for true freedom and the ability to forge her own path, one unburdened by the will of an external deity. By destroying her Empyrean flesh, she sought to sever this divine tether, to become truly autonomous. Following the successful execution of this intricate ritual, Rani transferred her spirit, her very consciousness, into a doll body. This artificial construct, crafted in the image of a snow witch, became her new vessel, a permanent shell for her liberated spirit. From that moment forward, she was known as Rani the Snow Witch, a spectral figure inhabiting an inanimate form, forever marked by the night she defied the gods. This transformation was not merely a change of appearance, it was a profound act of self-recreation, a spiritual rebirth that allowed her to escape the confines of her previous existence and pursue her own ambition for a new age in the lands between. The doll itself is a fascinating artifact, imbued with a cold, ethereal presence that perfectly encapsulates Rani's detached and enigmatic persona. It is a testament to her profound magical abilities and her unwavering resolve to escape the fate prescribed for her. The attack on Godwyn and Rani's self-inflicted death, those seemingly disparate events, were in fact two meticulously planned halves of a single, powerful ritual. The stolen fragment of the Rune of Death, once a part of the Elden Ring and controlled by Malekith, the Black Blade, was split into two distinct curse marks. One curse mark, the Mark of Death, was used to slay Godwyn's soul, leaving his body to fester. The other, the curse mark of Destined Death, was used by Rani to immolate her own flesh, preserving her spirit. This duality is crucial to understanding the true depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about killing Godwyn, nor was it just about Rani's escape. It was about leveraging the power of Destined Death in a specific, ritualistic manner to achieve two interconnected outcomes that served a larger, hidden agenda. The precision with which these events unfolded suggests a master manipulator at work, someone with an intimate understanding of the Elden Ring's power and the intricate mechanics of life and death in the lands between. Indeed, many scholars and lore enthusiasts in the lands between and beyond believe that the entire event was not merely a series of assassinations, but a grand ritualistic sacrifice with far deeper magical implications than initially perceived. The method of Godwyn's death, a soul killed but body intact, created a unique spiritual anomaly. His undead body became a fertile ground for the growth of those who live in death, a grotesque legion of undead beings who defy the natural order of life and death, their existence a direct affront to the Golden Order. This unintended consequence, or perhaps a calculated one, further destabilized the established religious and societal structures. The ritual, therefore, was not just about removing individuals from power or changing their forms, but about fundamentally altering the spiritual landscape of the lands between, creating new forms of existence, and challenging the very tenets of the Golden Order itself. It speaks to a level of foresight and magical prowess that few in the lands between could command, hinting at a hidden hand guiding these catastrophic events. In response to these cataclysmic events, the assassination of her beloved firstborn son and the defiance of her Empyrean daughter, Queen Marika the Eternal, the vessel of the greater will, shattered the Elden Ring. This act of unimaginable power and despair marked the true beginning of the shattering, a period of unprecedented chaos and destruction that would forever scar the lands between. Marika's motivations for this drastic action are complex and highly debated. Was it an act of grief stricken rage, a desperate attempt to reset the cosmic order after the desecration of her son and the rebellion of her daughter? Or was it a more calculated move, a desperate gamble to free herself from the greater will's influence, perhaps even mirroring Rani's own desire for autonomy? The shattering of the Elden Ring, the very embodiment of order and the source of all grace, plunged the lands between into an era of utter pandemonium, demonstrating the immense power Marika wielded, even in her despair. With the Elden Ring fractured into numerous great runes, its divine power dispersed, Marika's demigod children, each a powerful being in their own right, descended into a brutal and protracted war. These demigods, offspring of Marika and Godfrey, or Marika and Radagon, or Radagon and Renala, were driven by an insatiable lust for power, each vying to collect the great runes and become the next Elden Lord. The ensuing conflict, known as the Shattering War, tore the lands between apart. Vast armies clashed, ancient magic was unleashed, and countless lives were lost as the demigods carved up the land into their own warring fiefdoms. Castles crumbled, cities burned, and the once prosperous lands were reduced to desolate battlegrounds, a testament to the destructive ambition of Marika's progeny. The very land itself bears the scars of this devastating conflict, with ruined structures and lingering magical energies serving as grim reminders of the demigod's insatiable hunger for the Elden Ring's power. This widespread devastation further emphasizes the profound impact of the Night of the Black Knives, serving as the direct catalyst for the unraveling of the Golden Order and the descent into an age of endless war and decay. The consequences of that single night reverberated through every corner of the lands between, shaping its destiny for centuries to come. And so, as the dust settled on the immediate aftermath of the shattering, with the demigods locked in their endless destructive conflict, and the very fabric of the lands between fraying, a new chapter began to unfold. This brings us to our fifth major entry on the timeline, the true nature of the Tarnished and the guidance of grace, a period firmly set post-shattering. The previous entry detailing the conspiracy of the Black Knives and Rani's involvement laid bare the machinations that set the stage for this new age, an age where the exiled would return. For generations, the Tarnished, those who had lost the guidance of the Erdtree's grace, were banished from the lands between. Their very existence was an affront to the Golden Order, a testament to their perceived unworthiness. They were scattered across distant lands, forgotten by the very grace that once illuminated their path. Yet, in the wake of the shattering, a cataclysmic event that fractured the Elden Ring and plunged the lands between into chaos, a faint, golden light began to stir within these exiles. It was the guidance of grace, once withdrawn, now beckoning them back to the very shores from which they had been cast out. This return was not a gentle invitation, but a compelling, almost irresistible pull, drawing them across vast oceans and forgotten paths back to the land of their ancestors. They were called not by any discernible voice, but by an instinct, a flicker of purpose rekindled within their weary souls. However, the nature of this renewed guidance of grace is not as straightforward as it might seem. Is it a benevolent beacon, genuinely seeking to restore order and mend the fractured Elden Ring? Or is it something far more insidious, a subtle manipulation designed to serve a hidden agenda? This question lies at the heart of many tarnished theories, casting a long shadow over their perceived destiny. The very act of being called back after such a long and deliberate exile raises suspicions. Why now? Why these specific individuals, long deemed unworthy? Some of the more cynical, yet compelling theories suggest that the tarnished are not chosen heroes, destined for glory, but rather expendable pawns in a larger cosmic game. Their return is not a sign of their inherent worth, but merely a strategic deployment, a means to an end for entities far more powerful and ancient than themselves. The demigods, locked in their stalemate, had failed to mend the Elden Ring. Perhaps a fresh, unaligned force, easily manipulated and driven by a desperate hope, was precisely what was needed to break the deadlock. The tarnished, with their inherent resilience and lack of established allegiances, fit this role perfectly. They are, in essence, a disposable workforce, sent to undertake the most perilous tasks with little regard for their individual fates. This interpretation further extends to the grace itself. Far from being a divine blessing, it could be a sophisticated form of control, a gilded leash guiding the tarnished towards a predetermined outcome. The golden light, the whispers of destiny, the subtle nudges towards specific locations or encounters, all could be part of a grand design, funneling the tarnished down a very specific path. This path, while seemingly leading to the restoration of the Elden Ring, might in fact be serving a different, more self serving purpose for the entity or entities pulling the strings. The tarnished in this view are merely actors in a play whose script has already been written, their free will an illusion. They are directed, not truly guided, their actions choreographed to achieve a specific, unseen goal. A crucial piece of evidence supporting this theory of manipulation lies in the tarnished's inability to die permanently. When a tarnished falls in battle, they do not truly perish. Instead, they are resurrected, often at a nearby site of grace, ready to face their challenges once more. This seemingly miraculous ability, often interpreted as a sign of their chosen status, could also be seen as a deliberate design, a cruel insurance policy, ensuring their continued struggle. If the tarnished could truly die, their usefulness would be finite. But by granting them this endless cycle of resurrection, their masters ensure a perpetual supply of warriors, capable of enduring countless defeats and learning from each one until they finally succeed in their assigned task. This constant return to life, while offering hope, also implies a lack of true agency, a perpetual servitude to a higher power that demands their continued effort regardless of the personal cost. They are not allowed the release of death, bound instead to a relentless cycle of struggle and rebirth until their purpose is fulfilled. Upon their return, the tarnished are guided by this persistent grace to a specific, iconic location, the first step. This precipice, overlooking the desolate expanse of Limgrave, serves as their initial point of re entry into the lands between. It is here, gazing upon the ravaged landscape, that they first truly encounter the desolate state of the realm. The once vibrant and prosperous lands are now scarred by war, overgrown with strange flora, and populated by monstrous creatures and the maddened remnants of humanity. The golden light of grace, while still present, does little to alleviate the pervasive sense of decay and despair. It is a stark introduction, a visual confirmation of the immense task that lies before them. The journey ahead is clearly one of hardship and peril, a stark contrast to any romantic notions they might have harbored about their return, further highlighting their initial vulnerability and dependence. The newly returned tarnished are, for a time, maidenless. This seemingly innocuous detail carries significant weight within the lore. Without a maiden, a tarnished is unable to convert the runes they acquire from defeated foes into strength, effectively preventing them from leveling up and growing stronger. This inability to progress independently underscores their reliance on external aid, a clear indication that they are not self-sufficient heroes. They require a conduit, a guide, a partner to unlock their true potential. This dependency reinforces the idea of their manipulated nature, as their very growth is contingent upon an external factor, one that can be controlled or withheld. It is in this maidenless state that the tarnished encounter Vara, a mysterious and unsettling figure garbed in white. Vare, with his mocking tone and thinly veiled contempt, immediately highlights the tarnished's maidenless predicament. He questions their worth, their purpose, and their chances of success without a guiding maiden. His words are designed to sow doubt, to challenge their perceived destiny, and to subtly steer them towards an alternative path. He suggests that the traditional route to becoming an Elden Lord, through the guidance of grace and the service of a maiden, might not be the only way. Instead, he hints at darker, more forbidden avenues, specifically mentioning seeking an audience with Mohg, Lord of Blood. This interaction is a crucial early moment, presenting the tarnished with their first significant moral choice, and hinting at the existence of factions and powers beyond the immediate purview of the Golden Order and its grace. Vara's overt discouragement of the conventional path and his promotion of a more nefarious alternative further complicates the notion of Grace's benevolence, suggesting that there are indeed other powers at play, vying for the tarnished's allegiance. Just as the tarnished might begin to despair or consider Vara's dark proposition, a new figure emerges from the shadows, Melina. This enigmatic maiden, with her scarred eye and solemn demeanor, offers the tarnished an accord. In exchange for being guided to the foot of the Erdtree, she will serve as their maiden, granting them the ability to convert runes into strength and allowing them to level up. Melina's appearance is timely, almost too convenient, further fueling the theories of manipulation. Is she a benevolent savior or another piece on the chessboard? Her motives are initially shrouded in mystery, her past hinted at but never fully revealed. She speaks of a duty, a purpose tied to the Erdtree, but her true allegiances remain ambiguous. This accord, while seemingly a lifeline, binds the tarnished to her, and by extension, to her unknown goals. The ability to level up, the very mechanism of growth and power in the lands between, is now directly tied to Melina's presence, solidifying the Tarnished's dependence on external forces. This pivotal encounter marks the true beginning of the Tarnished's journey, setting them on a path dictated by a mysterious maiden and a guiding grace whose true intentions remain obscured. The stage is now set for a journey fraught with peril, moral ambiguity, and the constant question of whether the tarnished are truly masters of their own destiny or merely puppets dancing to a tune played by unseen hands. Melina's true motivations, however, remain shrouded in ambiguity, a recurring theme in the lands between. She speaks of burning the Erdtree, the colossal golden tree at the center of the world, and fulfilling a mysterious purpose given to her by her mother. This purpose is never fully elaborated upon, leaving players to ponder whether she is a benevolent guide, a tragic figure driven by a preordained fate, or perhaps an agent of a different unseen power. Her willingness to sacrifice herself for this goal and her veiled warnings about the path ahead only deepen the enigma surrounding her. Is her mother Marika, the former goddess, or perhaps someone else entirely, a forgotten deity or a primordial force? The answers are not readily given, adding another layer of uncertainty to the Tarnished's journey. It is amidst this backdrop of uncertainty that the Tarnished are explicitly directed by grace, the golden light emanating from the Erdtree, towards the various shard bearers. These are the demigods, the children and descendants of Queen Marika, who, following the shattering, claimed fragments of the Elden Ring for themselves. Each shard bearer, consumed by their newfound power and often driven to madness or despair, now rules over a portion of the lands between, their domains reflecting their distorted ambitions and the chaotic state of the world. Godric the Grafted, for instance, a pathetic yet brutal figure, clings to power through grotesque grafting, while Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, retreats into her academy, a shadow of her former glory. Radon, the Star Scourge, remains a formidable warrior, yet is afflicted by scarlet rot, a devastating plague. Morgoth, the Omen King, secretly defends the Erdtree, his identity hidden from the very people he protects. Each encounter with a shard bearer is a pivotal moment, requiring the Tarnished to overcome immense challenges and claim their great rune, a fragment of the shattered Elden Ring. The guidance of grace, therefore, is not merely a suggestion, but a direct imperative, pushing the Tarnished towards these formidable foes. This divine guidance manifests practically through the sights of grace, luminous golden motes of light scattered across the vast expanse of the lands between. These sites act as crucial checkpoints, allowing the Tarnished to rest, recover, and level up their abilities. More importantly, however, they serve as directional markers, their golden tendrils pointing the way towards the next objective, often towards a shard bearer or a critical location. This system of guidance is both a blessing and a subtle form of control. While it provides a clear path through a treacherous world, it also dictates the Tarnished's immediate objectives, subtly shaping their journey and ensuring they remain on the intended course. The sites of grace are not just convenient save points, they are tangible manifestations of the greater will's influence, guiding the Tarnished like pawns on a cosmic chessboard. Throughout their perilous journey, the Tarnished encounter other Tarnished, individuals who, like them, have been called back to the lands between. Some of these fellow exiles are also guided by grace, pursuing similar goals, albeit sometimes with different methods or interpretations of their destiny. Roderica, for example, initially lost and despairing, eventually finds her purpose as a spirit tuner. Dee, hunter of the dead, relentlessly pursues those who defile the dead, driven by a fervent faith. Others, however, have lost their way, their grace faded, their purpose forgotten. These individuals often wander aimlessly, succumb to madness, or pursue selfish agendas, becoming obstacles or tragic figures in the Tarnished's path. Kenneth Haight, a self proclaimed lord, is one such character, caught in a petty squabble over his fort. The presence of these other Tarnished highlights the diverse responses to the call of grace and the multifaceted struggles inherent in the lands between. It also raises questions about the nature of free will versus divine intervention, as some Tarnished clearly deviate from the intended path, while others adhere to it with unwavering devotion. One of the most enigmatic figures among the Tarnished is Sir Gideon Ofnir, known as the All-Knowing. He presents himself as a scholar and a gatherer of knowledge, residing in the Round Table Hold, a sanctuary for Tarnished. Gideon actively seeks out information from other Tarnished, sending them on quests to uncover secrets and defeat powerful foes. He compiles this intelligence, seemingly for his own grand design, suggesting a larger, more intricate network of manipulation at play. Gideon's motivations are complex. While he aids the Tarnished, he also harbors a deep-seated cynicism regarding the possibility of becoming Elden Lord, believing that the path is ultimately futile. His actions imply a sophisticated understanding of the various factions and powers at work in the lands between, and his role as an information broker positions him as a central, albeit morally ambiguous, figure in the grand conspiracy. Is he truly working for the Tarnished's best interests, or is he merely using them to further his own obscure objectives, perhaps even working against the very destiny he claims to understand? His ultimate betrayal, when he attempts to prevent the Tarnished from reaching the Erdtree, confirms his duplicitous nature, revealing him as an agent of the greater will, seeking to maintain the status quo. Further adding to the layers of cryptic guidance is Enya, the finger reader. Stationed at the Round Table Hold, Enya serves as an intermediary between the Tarnished and the Two Fingers, ancient, colossal digits that loom over the sanctuary. Enya interprets the Two Fingers' gestures, translating their subtle movements into cryptic pronouncements and prophecies. She provides the Tarnished with vital lore, insights into the history of the lands between, and guidance on how to harness the power of the great runes. Her pronouncements are often veiled in metaphor and symbolism, requiring careful interpretation, but they are nonetheless crucial to understanding the unfolding narrative. Enya's role underscores the reliance on intermediaries for divine communication, suggesting that direct understanding of the greater will's intentions is beyond mortal comprehension. The Two Fingers themselves, though seemingly benevolent in their guidance, are revealed to be extensions of the greater will, the enigmatic outer god that established the Golden Order and bestowed the Elden Ring upon the lands between. This revelation implies a higher power's direct and pervasive influence over the events unfolding. The greater will, through the two fingers and the guidance of grace, is orchestrating the tarnished's journey, pushing them towards a specific outcome. This raises profound questions about free will and destiny. Are the tarnished truly choosing their path, or are they merely puppets dancing to the tune of a cosmic entity? The greater will's motives are never fully explained, leaving players to speculate on its ultimate goals. Is it genuinely seeking to restore order, or does it have a more self serving agenda, using the tarnished as a means to consolidate its power or achieve some other unknown objective? The inherent ambiguity surrounding the greater will makes its influence all the more unsettling. The ultimate goal presented to the tarnished, as guided by grace, is to become Elden Lord. This title signifies the ruler of the lands between, the wielder of the repaired Elden Ring, and the one who establishes a new age. However, the true nature of this destiny is fraught with questions. What does it truly mean to be Elden Lord? Is it a benevolent leadership, restoring peace and prosperity, or is it merely the continuation of a cycle of power and conflict? The previous Elden Lords, including Godfrey and Marika, ultimately faced their own downfalls or became instruments of the greater will, suggesting that the title itself may be a gilded cage. The various endings available to the tarnished, each leading to a different age in the lands between, further complicate this notion of a singular, predetermined destiny. The tarnished has the agency to choose or to be swayed by other influences, leading to outcomes that diverge significantly from the greater will's presumed intentions. This inherent choice, despite the pervasive guidance, suggests a glimmer of free will within the grand design, allowing the tarnished to potentially forge their own path, or at least to interpret their destiny in a way that challenges the established order. The journey to become Elden Lord is not a straightforward path to glory, but a complex moral and existential dilemma, forcing the tarnished to confront the very nature of power, faith, and the will of gods. As we move through the ongoing narrative of the lands between, continuing our exploration into the cosmic forces at play, we arrive at a critical understanding that recontextualizes much of what we've discussed thus far. The true nature of the tarnished, and indeed the very fabric of reality within Elden Ring, is inextricably linked to a profound and ancient struggle. What began as a divine order, seemingly absolute and unchallenged, reveals itself to be but one facet of a much grander and far more perilous cosmic tapestry. For as we delve into the ongoing machinations of the outer gods, we uncover a truth that reshapes our perception of the entire conflict. The greater will, the seemingly omnipotent entity that bestowed the Elden Ring upon the lands between and established the Golden Order, is not the sole divine power in this universe. Far from it. It is, in fact, just one of many outer gods vying for influence, each possessing its own agenda, its own vision for existence, and its own chosen champions or agents within the world. This revelation transforms the seemingly straightforward narrative of a fractured kingdom into a sprawling, multidimensional proxy war where the fate of all life hangs in the balance, a mere pawn in a cosmic chess match. Throughout the lands between, the whispers and roars of these other divine entities are not merely theoretical. They are active, palpable forces, shaping destinies and instigating cataclysms. The frenzied flame, the formless mother, the god of rot, and the enigmatic dark moon are all actively engaged in this struggle, their influence manifesting in profound and often terrifying ways across the land. Each of these outer gods seeks to impose its own unique order, or conversely, its own brand of chaos upon the lands between, challenging the supremacy of the greater will and offering alternative, often horrifying paths for existence. The entire conflict of Elden Ring, from the shattering of the Elden Ring itself to the myriad struggles of demigods and tarnished alike, can thus be seen by some as a vast, intricate proxy war between these cosmic entities. Mortals, demigods, and even the very environment become instruments in this grander, incomprehensible struggle, their actions and allegiances unknowingly serving the will of unseen ancient powers. The motivations behind the shattering, the rise of various factions, and even the differing endings available to the tarnished protagonist all find their roots in the competing interests of these outer gods. The greater will's influence, as we have extensively discussed, is primarily exerted through the Golden Order and its appointed emissaries, the Two Fingers. This outer god's dominion is characterized by a desire for order, a strict hierarchy, and a specific interpretation of life and death as dictated by the Elden Ring. Its agents, such as Marika and her lineage, were tasked with maintaining this order, guiding the lands between towards a predetermined destiny of stability and conformity. The Golden Order itself is a testament to the greater will's power, a vast theological and political structure designed to enforce its cosmic decree, with the Two Fingers serving as direct conduits for its enigmatic pronouncements, communicating through gestures and cryptic messages that are then interpreted by their faithful followers, the Finger Maidens. The Erdtree, that colossal golden sentinel dominating the skyline, is the ultimate symbol of the greater will's presence, its roots delving deep into the earth, its branches reaching towards the heavens, a constant reminder of its pervasive influence and the life-giving grace it bestows. In stark opposition to this structured existence stands the frenzied flame. This terrifying outer god seeks to return all life to a singular, undifferentiated chaos, a primordial soup where all distinctions, all forms, and all individual identities are utterly annihilated, burned away in a cataclysmic inferno. Its philosophy is one of absolute unity through destruction, a rejection of all creation and division. The adherents of the frenzied flame, often driven to madness by its unbearable whispers, believe that the only true peace lies in the complete eradication of all existence, reducing the diverse tapestry of the world into a single, molten, homogeneous entity. The Three Fingers, a grotesque and charred counterpart to the Two Fingers, serve as the emissaries of this outer god, offering a chilling alternative to the greater will's guidance. Their touch, a searing mark upon the flesh, bestows the power of the frenzied flame, but at a terrible cost, the complete loss of self and the embrace of a fiery madness that consumes all. The very landscape around the frenzied villages and the hidden depths of the subterranean shunning grounds, where the flame's influence is strongest, bears the scars of its destructive power, with crumbling structures, charred earth, and the agonizing cries of those driven to utter despair. Then there is the Formless Mother, a malevolent and enigmatic outer god, whose influence is subtle yet profound, operating from the shadows and whispering insidious promises to those receptive to its dark allure. This entity is characterized by its amorphous nature, its lack of true form, and its insidious manipulation. Its power lies in blood and sacrifice, in the creation of new life through unnatural means, and in the establishment of a new, terrifying dynasty. The formless mother whispers to Mog, Lord of Blood, one of Marika's demigod children, compelling him to establish a new dynasty, one founded on the corrupted blood of Miquella, his half brother. Mogwin dynasty, hidden deep within the treacherous depths of the Mogwin palace, is the physical manifestation of the formless mother's dark ambition. Mog, driven by a perverse love for Miquella and a desire to elevate him to godhood through the formless mother's power, seeks to usher in an era of blood and depravity, where the very essence of life is twisted and reformed to serve this unseen, malevolent deity. The blood flame, a terrifying and unique form of fire that burns with a crimson hue and inflicts a debilitating bleed status, is the signature power of the formless mother, wielded by Mog and his followers, a testament to its grotesque dominion over the very essence of life. The very act of Mog attempting to commune with Miquella in his cocoon, bathing him in blood, is a ritualistic offering to the formless mother, an attempt to birth a new god in its image, a god of blood and decay, a stark and horrifying contrast to the golden purity of the Erdtree and the greater will. Meanwhile, the god of rot, a horrifying entity of decay and blight, lies as sealed away within millennia, Blade of Miquella, one of the most fearsome warriors in the lands between. This outer god is a being of pestilence, its very essence of virulent disease that seeks to spread its scarlet blight across the land, consuming all life in a slow, agonizing decay. Millennia, afflicted by this curse from birth, struggles constantly against its insidious influence, her body slowly succumbing to its ravages. The scarlet rot, a debilitating and often fatal affliction, is the signature of this outer god, transforming lush landscapes into putrid swamps and strong warriors into withered husks. The consequences of its release are catastrophic, as evidenced by the devastation wrought upon Kailid, a once fertile land, now a desolate wasteland of crimson blight and mutated creatures, a chilling testament to the god of rot's destructive power. Millennia's valiant efforts to contain this insidious force, her refusal to fully succumb to its power, are a constant struggle, a testament to her indomitable will, yet the very act of her unleashing her full power, as seen in her second phase, unleashes a terrifying torrent of scarlet rot, demonstrating the immense destructive power of the entity she harbors within. So her very existence is a constant battle against the encroachment of this outer god, a living prison for a cosmic horror that yearns to be unleashed upon the world, to paint the entire lands between in shades of scarlet and decay, fulfilling its destructive, blighted agenda. Finally, offering a stark and often alluring alternative to the established orders is the Dark Moon, associated with Rani the Witch. This enigmatic outer god, unlike the others, does not seek to impose a violent or destructive order, but rather offers an alternative destiny for the lands between, one free from the oppressive influence of the greater will and its golden dogma. Rani, rejecting her fate as a demigod of the Golden Order, seeks to usher in an age of stars, an era of cold, dark freedom, where the influence of the outer gods is distant and the fate of humanity is determined by their own will, guided by the silent, watchful gaze of the cosmos. Her quest involves severing the ties that bind the lands between to the greater will, seeking a new path, a new order that emphasizes intellectual pursuit, self determination, and a rejection of the rigid, predetermined paths laid out by the Golden Order. The dark moon, shrouded in mystery and silence, represents a different kind of cosmic power, one that values freedom and autonomy over divine decree, offering a chilling yet compelling vision of a world free from the constant meddling of the other outer gods, a world where the stars themselves hold the key to a new, silent, and profound destiny for the lands between. And while the greater will certainly exerted immense power, it was far from the only cosmic entity vying for dominion over the lands between. The fell god, for instance, an ancient and wrathful deity, found its fervent worship among the towering fire giants. This fiery entity represented a primordial force of destruction, a stark counterpoint to the orderly, life giving principles espoused by the nascent Golden Order. The fire giants, with their colossal forms and mastery over flame, served as the living embodiment of this outer god's destructive will, their very existence a defiance of the Erdtree's burgeoning supremacy. Their long and bloody war against Marika and her forces was not merely a territorial dispute, but a clash of cosmic ideologies, a struggle between the burgeoning order of the greater will and the untamed destructive power of the fell god. The scars of this conflict, both physical and spiritual, are still deeply etched into the landscape of the mountaintops of the giants, a testament to the raw power wielded by this ancient deity. Before the golden light of the Erdtree fully encompassed the lands between, there existed a more chaotic, primordial state of life, a time when the very fabric of existence was fluid and untamed. This era is subtly referenced through the concept of the crucible, the primordial form of the Erdtree itself. Imagine a time before distinct species, before rigid classifications, when all life was intertwined and expressed through a myriad of forms, a swirling vortex of shared essence. The Crucible Knights, those ancient warriors who bear the vestiges of this primordial power, manifest physical traits such as wings, tails, and horns, echoing the chaotic yet potent biodiversity of this earlier age. These traits, later deemed omening and cursed by the Golden Order, were once expressions of life's raw, unfiltered vigor. The crucible, therefore, hints at an earlier, more chaotic state of being, a time when the greater will's influence had not yet fully imposed its rigid structure upon the world, a period of untamed growth and boundless potential. It represents a fundamental difference in how life itself was perceived and organized, a stark contrast to the later, more structured, and ultimately restrictive worldview of the Golden Order. The Erdtree's eventual dominance was not achieved without significant struggle, however. Before Marika's ascendance and the establishment of the Golden Order, another formidable power challenged its nascent supremacy, the gloam-eyed queen and her formidable god-slaying black flame. This enigmatic figure, described as an Empyrean and a former wielded of destined death, commanded a terrifying power capable of incinerating even divine beings. Her followers, the Godskin apostles and Godskin nobles, clad in the flayed skins of vanquished deities, served as the instruments of her destructive will. The Black Flame ritual, a dark and potent form of magic, allowed them to inflict wounds that would continuously burn away the life force of their victims, even after the initial strike. This was a direct and existential threat to the nascent Erdtree and the demigods who served it. The conflict between the gloam-eyed queen and Marika was a pivotal moment in the history of the lands between, a cosmic power struggle that ultimately saw Marika emerge victorious, sealing away the god-slaying black flame and stripping the gloam-eyed queen of her power. This victory, however, was not absolute. The remnants of the black flame still linger, and the Godskin apostles, though scattered, continue their grim work, suggesting that the influence of the gloam-eyed queen, or perhaps the outer god she served, has not been entirely extinguished. And speaking of ancient powers, the Deathbirds and their spectral ghost flame are intrinsically linked to an even older, more primordial outer god of death. This entity predates the Golden Order's concept of destined death, a carefully regulated and controlled form of mortality. The ghost flame, with its eerie blue luminescence and chilling touch, represents a raw, untamed form of death, a natural cycle of decay and rebirth that existed long before the Golden Order attempted to impose its own rules upon the afterlife. The Deathbirds, skeletal avian creatures wreathed in this spectral fire, are the emissaries of this ancient death god, guiding souls to their final rest, or perhaps preventing them from finding it. Their presence in desolate, forgotten places, often guarding ancient burial grounds, underscores their connection to a form of death that is both natural and terrifyingly inevitable. The twin bird, a colossal death bird of immense power, is believed to be an avatar or direct manifestation of this very outer god of death. Its sheer size and the intensity of its ghost flame suggest a being of immense cosmic significance, a direct conduit for the will of this primordial deity. Encountering the twin bird would not merely be facing a powerful creature, but confronting a fragment of the outer god of death itself, a force that embodies the raw, unfiltered essence of mortality. The twin bird's existence highlights the enduring power of these ancient, often forgotten, outer gods, their influence persisting even after the rise of new cosmic entities. Ultimately, the various endings available to the Tarnished represent not just different futures for the lands between, but the triumph of one outer god's influence over another. The choices made by the Tarnished protagonist are not merely personal decisions, but cosmic declarations, shaping the destiny of an entire world according to the dictates of a specific, often unseen celestial power. Each ending is a testament to the enduring struggle between these powerful entities, a final, decisive move in a game played on a cosmic scale. Consider, for example, the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. Here, the lands between are consumed by the chaotic, all-encompassing fire of the frenzied flame. This ending is not merely a destructive act, but the triumph of an outer god dedicated to the eradication of all distinction, all individuality, and ultimately all suffering. The frenzied flame, with its searing heat and maddening whispers, promises to melt all into a single, undifferentiated whole, a return to a primordial chaos where no life, no pain can exist. This is the ultimate expression of its will, an apocalyptic cleansing that leaves nothing but a burning, formless void. The Tarnished, by embracing this path, becomes the instrument of this outer god's terrifying vision, a harbinger of universal dissolution. The very concept of life, as understood by the greater will, is utterly obliterated, replaced by a singular, all-consuming inferno. This ending is a stark reminder of the destructive potential inherent in some of these outer gods, their agendas capable of reshaping reality itself in terrifying ways. In stark contrast, Rani's Age of the Stars ending ushers in an era guided by the distant, cold influence of the dark moon. This is a deliberate rejection of the greater will's direct intervention and the oppressive golden order. Rani, an Empyrean who cast aside her physical body to become a spirit, seeks to free the lands between from the meddling of the outer gods, or at least from their direct controlling influence. Her vision is one of detachment, of allowing life to flourish under the silent, watchful gaze of the cosmos, rather than under the heavy hand of a divine ruler. The dark moon, her chosen celestial body, represents this philosophy of quiet observation and indirect guidance. It is a future where destiny is not dictated by a single, all powerful entity, but unfolds under the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. The Tarnished, by assisting Rani, becomes the catalyst for this new age, an age of freedom from overt divine manipulation, where the fate of the lands between is left to its own devices, guided by the subtle currents of the cosmos. This ending represents a shift from overt divine rule to a more hands off philosophical approach to existence, a testament to the diverse and often conflicting agendas of these powerful ancient entities. The lands between, under the dark moon, are no longer subject to the constant push and pull of their divine overlords, but are instead left to chart their own course, a silent testament to Rani's ambition and the enduring power of the outer gods, even in their absence. Transitioning from the intricate web of divine ambitions and the machinations of the outer gods, we now turn our attention to a figure whose very existence is shrouded in mystery, yet whose purpose is inextricably linked to the fate of the lands between itself. Our timeline now brings us to the journey of the Tarnished, specifically focusing on the enigmatic Melina, a spectral guide whose true identity and motivations form a cornerstone of the Elden Ring narrative. It is early in the Tarnished's perilous journey, shortly after their harrowing escape from the tempestuous confines of Stormvale Castle, that Melina first manifests. Her appearance is not one of chance, but of calculated necessity. As the Tarnished rests at a site of grace, those ethereal bonfires that serve as checkpoints and sanctuaries across the ravaged landscape, Melina materializes before them. Her form is translucent, shimmering, a clear indication of her non-physical nature, yet her voice is resonant, her gaze piercing. She extends an offer, a solemn accord. She will serve as the Tarnished's maiden,